The first two speakers have both explicitly and implicitly given us a framework with which to describe the Zionist response to delegitimization, as well as both remaining within their time frames. I do want to acknowledge that Malcolm Hoenlein, the Executive Vice Chairman of the Conference of Presidents, has come into the room since we started, and simply ask you not to tell him any of the things that I said before he came into the room. We're now very interested to hear the perspective of Ken Bobb.
Thank you, Richard. Last week, I received an email from a student at a college where there's a small Jewish population. In fact, there are more Muslim students than Jewish students on campus. His mother is aware of my work in Amenu and suggested he contact me with his dilemma. The young man is now head of the Israel Club on campus. He explains that there are not enough Jewish students to create separate left-wing and right-wing Israel-oriented organizations. So he wants the Israel Club to try and change the sentiment towards Israel on campus through cross-cultural events and speakers from the ideological spectrum. He believes this approach will lower tension around these sensitive issues and educate at the same time. He's meeting resistance from other Jewish students who are suspicious of this liberal approach and just want the group to be pro-Israel. Reading his email, I couldn't help but think about all the talk in the Jewish community over the past couple of years regarding who belongs in the pro-Israel tent. This is a perfect forum to explain that years before there was talk of this, there was a very large Zionist tent, big enough for the likes of Aleph Dalet Gordon and Martin Buber and Achad Ha'am and Rav Kook and Zev Jabotinsky, among others. In fact, historically, people were generally hyphenated Zionists, proudly stating they are cultural Zionists or religious Zionists or revisionist Zionists or socialist Zionists. Despite the temptation, I will not deliver a spellbinding lecture on the history of Zionism right now. But I want to point out that all these traditional Zionist approaches translate into modern responses to the challenges facing Israel. As a follower of Gordon, my progressive Zionism informs the following specific responses to attempts to delegitimize Israel. First of all, as has been said many times already today, we must educate our young people about Zionism, meeting them where they are thinking now. This may be heresy at today's setting, but advocacy is not the be-all and end-all when it comes to our campus work. We must first help students make sense of this for themselves, to develop their own critical thinking on the matter. Only at that point will they, if they choose, be competent to convince someone else of the righteousness of the cause as they see it. As they see it is an important element of this approach. In their zeal to defend Israel, some communal organizations prefer to impose a certain approach, alienating a large swath of Jewish students. This turns out to be self-defeating, as fewer students want to engage in the political work, and some of them opt out completely when it comes to identification with Israel. We should be engaging with students, not alienating them. Next, we must encourage people to get involved personally with Israel. This means enabling them to visit Israel and develop their own meaningful connection. It also means seeking out volunteer activities on behalf of Israeli causes that speak to the values and our Zionist identity. Such projects can relate to healthcare, sports, religion, social issues, or human rights. In this case, all serve the same purpose of creating a deeper connection for the individual. The Zionist organizations would do well to think creatively in this area, providing a menu of opportunities for members and supporters. In light of the struggle that most of our organizations are having with attracting a younger cohort, we must be cognizant that what may have been an attractive project to our generation may not be to the younger one. For young adults, realizing your Zionism can mean the dramatic act taken recently by 12 young people, members of the Habunim Jor Zionist youth movement, who recently moved to Israel to form an urban kibbutz and to work in the field of education with Israeli and diaspora youth. They join a movement 1,500 strong that has really only developed over the past 10 or 15 years. These young people are the modern version of the Chalutzim, the pioneers who sang Anu Banu Arza, Livnot Ulihibanot Ba. We came to Israel to build and for it to rebuild us. Although they are not bending over in the hot sun like in Gordon's day, removing rocks from a field, they are indeed doing the heavy lifting required in Israeli society. They generally live in smaller periphery cities, live very modest lifestyles, and try to improve the lives of children and youth in their communities. There is a direct link between these young idealists and the Israeli summer of social protest that we just have witnessed. We saw an awakening in Israel of the younger generation regarding the future of their country. As Zionists, we can point out to our detractors that the demonstrations are a proof of a vibrant democratic society, one that aspires, as put forth in Israel's Declaration of Establishment, and I quote, to live in a state based on freedom, justice, and peace, as envisioned by the prophets of Israel, unquote. Such a country, the declaration continues, promises, quote, Arab inhabitants of the state of Israel full and equal citizenship. Indeed, Arab citizens of Israel, who have sadly been partially denied this equal opportunity, participated among the hundreds of thousands of demonstrators who poured into the street calling for a more equitable distribution of the country's wealth. Those pictures from Tel Aviv actually help Israel's image in the world as a liberal state seeking greater social justice. In this light, I think it was unfortunate that for the most part, American Jewish and Zionist organizations did little to identify with or support the protesters, despite the fact that the polls showed that the demonstrators enjoyed an unheard of 87% of support in the Israeli public. This was an opportunity missed, both from a policy and public relations point of view. Finally, for progressive Zionists, the question of Israel and Palestine is not a zero-sum game. Elements in the pro-Israel community regularly frame it as an either-or proposition. In fact, we believe the only way to perpetuate Zionism is in the form of a Jewish and democratic state living side by side with a Palestinian one. For that reason, we believe that an expression of Zionism to aggressively seek accommodation with the Palestinians. Now, I know there are others who see that differently, and this is not the proper forum to argue these points. However, it is unacceptable that this view is ever discredited as somehow not pro-Israel enough. In fact, one of the best weapons the Zionist movement and the Jewish community has in this campaign is us, to blunt these anti-Israel attacks. The progressives in the Zionist community have street credibility to address the delegitimizers' erroneous claims by using language and arguments that their target audience will understand. Of equal importance, progressive Zionists can offer an alternative narrative and a course of action that emphasizes peacemaking and coexistence. In the battle to win the hearts and minds of left-leaning university students and other Americans, the messenger is just as important as the message. Since we are opposed to some of the same Israeli policies that are the focus of our enemies, we bring authenticity and experience to the task. On this note, there's been some discussion of J Street today, and I don't want to engage in that conversation right now. I do, however, in the spirit of Dan Mariashin, who said that we have to call out misinformation when we see it, I want to correct one piece that was mentioned earlier. J Street is publicly opposed to BDS. You can read about it on their website. And in fact, if you speak to the JCRC, the Jewish Community Relations Council of San Francisco, J Street was an important ally in beating back a proposal at University of California, Berkeley on BDS. And in the words of the assistant director of the JCRC in San Francisco, who I spoke to personally, she said, we needed J Street, they speak Berkeley. So please, don't interrupt me, please. Don't interrupt me. So, in fact, we, the progressives, are one of the best weapons that we have as a movement. Later today, someone who toils in these trenches, Dan Fleschler, will be covering this topic in more detail. In closing, how shall I respond to the student's email that I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks today? I will explain to him that he's on the right track, addressing education on the issues first. I will tell him that while it is difficult at times, it is worth the effort to try to work together with other students that have different political beliefs. I may then just have to offer to come down to his campus and give a presentation on the big Zionist tent. Thank you, and Shana Tova.